Good morning and welcome to our session. For all of you who are wondering how to use the headset, please turn on channel 5. We're in workshop room 5, so that's the indication that you need to press number 5. Otherwise, you'll be listening, spying on to our neighbor conversations. So good morning and welcome, and thank you for joining us in this early morning hour after, I think, several receptions last night. So we appreciate you being here for this, what at least all of us here think will be a very interesting and important conversation. It will also be very interactive. So if anybody, I mean, of course, you're all seated, that's fine. But if anybody still wants to join here, the head table, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, of course, also from the audience, you will be invited to contribute. Maybe I should start with saying this session is called Information Integrity Through Journalism and Alternative Platforms. My name is Julia Haas. I'm advisor to the OSCE representative on freedom of the media, and this is a joint session where we bring in really a lot of different components. So we organize it together with IMS and together with Nick Brazil and then also the Deutsche Welle Akademie. So we really bring in a lot of different components, which I think just comes to show that the topic of information integrity, but also, of course, the broader issues that are linked to it can really be approached from vast different perspectives and approaches, showing that it's an umbrella topic, and there are different angles that we try to combine in this conversation today to really look at what information integrity means, what role journalism plays in that, whether and how big tech is undermining information integrity, and how we can overcome this undermining through journalism and platforms. And of course, most importantly, really what we can do about it. So I think the starting point for the conversation that we are having today is really this dominance, this power concentration that was also very highly discussed throughout the first day of the IGF yesterday, where there was almost this basic understanding that we currently cannot have information integrity in the way that our information ecosystem and the digital part of it is organized, is structured. And then there are different ways of approaching it, different angles, and today we will try to bring it together to really say or see what concretely could be done, and also what roles states can play in this regard. So I'm very happy to have a very multi-stakeholder panel also to bring in these different components to see what individuals, what civil society, what the media, what also the government, very importantly, and also international organization and media development organizations can do. So I will just very, very briefly introduce the speakers once they take the floor. But again, to let you know that it's interactive, so please feel free at any point also to contribute. If you think it's an interesting question or angle, you want to add something, you have any experience or examples to share, this will be very, very useful. And with that, I would like to hand over for kind of like another round of introductory opening remarks to Denmark's tech ambassador, Anne-Marie Engtoft-Melgaard. And with this, thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope you can all hear me. I am delighted to be, this is my first, I think many of us, this is my first IGF workshop this year, this round, and I think there's not a more important topic to start out on this question of information integrity. When you look at the sheer numbers, things are not looking great. It's never been more dangerous to be a journalist around the world. It's never been more dire, I think, for traditional news and media to make its way through the absolute noise of what has also become the internet for many of us. I've been to IGF and Net Mondial and a lot of these gatherings over the past many years discussing a deterioration of the information integrity environment. The role of big tech we discussed for, I think, close to a decade by now. And with that, the discussions on polarization, on a fragmented media landscape that sprawls into a fragmentation of our democracy. So I think the backdrop of what we are discussing and what we are meeting is incredibly grim and dark, and many are facing the real life challenges. And it is a reminder that democracy is not an act of voting. Democracy is something that we exercise on a daily basis, an informed discussion, exchanging different views and opinions, and doing it in an information environment that is healthy and sound and sprawling and allows for that creativity, expression, and for a democratic debate. And so the system is under pressure, but one thing that does make me, I think, somewhat hopeful and optimistic is that we see more and more individuals trying to break free of what is the current environment. And so while I hope that today we'll have a discussion that we continue on, so what do we do around these questions of increased polarization, disinformation, how it creeps into the very institutions of democracy? What is it with the business models that are still not serving public interest when it comes to information integrity? What is the opposite side of that? Who are those individuals who are finding different ways, using different platforms? I am delighted to see the number of new platforms that are taking that quest of saying, we don't have to use the only big 2, 3, 4 platforms. We can make our own ones. When I meet young people and they, I lament that they don't read newspapers, they say, but I follow TikTok. And there are these individuals that I have no clue who are, but they have 50,000, 100,000 followers. And they actually give credible news, but in a very different way than my long format and slightly boring newspaper articles that I prefer to read. And so information integrity is a top priority for Denmark. This has been something we've been engaging in over the years. We launched a blueprint on information integrity in collaboration with Wikimedia in the Netherlands last year. We've been engaged through the Freedom Online Coalition and at these various gatherings with so many of you. We believe that it's pushing a positive vision of trust, agency, and diversity. Trust, agency, and diversity. This really has to be a root cause of how we're thinking about information integrity. And I hope that we can have a conversation today on how do we do that and how do we ensure that in that there's greater platform accountability and accountability in this community. How do we keep ourselves up to the standards so when we meet again 5 years from now, we have actually moved the needle in information integrity? We see that power is concentrated with big tech, and I'll finish in just a second, and the governments who regulate these things, and that's the one I represent here. IGF is really an underpinning of the multi-stakeholder model. So with that, use the multi-stakeholder model today in today's discussion on maybe telling either big tech or governments like myself what we need to do to get it more right and what we need to do to advance this so-called information integrity that is really about a space online where all of us likes to be, dares to be, and can exercise their democratic rights. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for this very strong words. I think really these key words that you mentioned about trust, agency, and diversity, I think will be a beautiful setup for the conversation we're having today to really frame everything around it. Another point that I found incredibly important that you said is that the democracy is really this process, right? It's really about every day. Then, of course, elections are a peak. But it's about being able to be informed. And in the end, what we're talking about is pluralism, which is what democracy is about, and being able to have this different angles and different platforms and different opportunities to express oneself, to access information, and all of that. So I want to just very briefly also tell you a few sentences on the approach that the OSCE is taking. So as you might be aware, the OSCE is a security organization originally, but really understanding human rights as essential component of security. And there we have a representative on freedom of the media, where we work a lot also on the issues that were mentioned. And we are about to finalize policy recommendations precisely to states that were developed over the course of the last almost 1 year now in a set of roundtables and consultations to try to bring together different experts, different perspectives and experiences to try to identify not only what the key challenges are in the information space, particularly from the perspective of journalism and independent media, but to really say how to take it further. What are the different angles? And something, the way we approached it is to look at basically 3 components that we understood as being essential in building an information space that is based on information integrity, on agency, on pluralism, diversity, all the keywords that you have also been mentioning. And one of that is the question of financial survival. So really the question of media viability. Because if we speak about the availability and accessibility of public interest information, of course, we have to make sure that individuals and societies are able to continue to produce such quality information. So one of the aspects we are approaching is to look at what measures are needed and how states can support an environment where media is sustainable in this ecosystem of power concentration. So how to make sure that those who distribute and benefit also financially from journalism pay the journalists. So there is a lot of experience that many of you will be aware of regarding remuneration, fair compensation, bargaining codes, digital levy. It's also a point that is coming more and more into the discussion. But then the second aspect is also if we are able to make sure that journalism is available so they are able to exist and to continue to work, then also it's a question of how to make it visible, right? Because we all know that in the current information space, it's not only about high quality public interest piece of information being out there somewhere, but it's really the question of how to get it to the attention, because the business model you've been referring to is really about this attention and way more the visibility than it being available at some point. So the second aspect we've been looking at is really how to make sure that there is due prominence to journalism and to quality information, and what approaches states could take to mandate this visibility without risking, on the one hand, to further entrench the power of these actors to actually distribute the content, but also without the risk of capture and political pressure from governmental side or from captured regulatory bodies. And then the third aspect that we see as kind of interlinked but equally important is also the question of safety. Because of course, if we want to have quality journalism available online, that means that journalists also need to be safe to navigate in these spaces. So we will also be providing a lot of recommendations on how the safety of journalists can be better realized in the digital spaces. But something that really became clear in all these discussions is while we need some of these urgent mitigation measures almost in this current ecosystem that we are in, there is also an increasing recognition from the entire community, be it the media community, the internet community, the information integrity community, all of that we are almost at a point in time where we really have to move beyond this kind of like fixing here and there the ecosystem, but we have to be stronger and better in imagining how do we see a healthy information space. This is also a word you've been using to really say how can we create a space where everybody is able to have trust, agency, and diversity, to go back to these keywords. And it's really great that today we will be able to hear about a few initiatives from both sides, right? How to be able to rein in on this power concentration in the information space, but then also to go this extra mile, so to speak, to create alternatives, to have ideas of how we can reclaim almost this space that is supposed to belong to everybody, to be able to have informed people, informed societies, and therefore be able to have democracy and security in the end. So this will be published, just a short teaser in September, and I'm very happy, of course, to share it with everybody. It will also be published online. So just to give you a bit of the background also where the OSCE is coming from and why we are also very happy to bring together this, together with the partners, this conversation today. And now I would like to bring in also the perspective of one specific country, because an idea of today was also to really bring in the international component, all these different multi-stakeholder initiatives such as the IGF, but then also really go to the regional level, to the local level almost, to see what has been tried, what lessons can we draw for this international conversation and for this multi-stakeholder cooperation. So I want to hand over to Renata Mieli, who is, I think, the coordinator also of NIC and from the Ministry of apologies, I didn't prepare properly on the names. The special advisor for the Ministry of Science and Technology, apology for that. But it would be really interesting if you can, like, also building on this strong introduction that we heard, what is the experience, like how does the Brazilian side go into this conversation on information integrity? Why do you think it's important also from this positive framing instead of just speaking about disinformation as we did a few years ago? And also considering this big tech power, Brazil has intervened and has tried to take very concrete steps. So if you could share a little bit from your side, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you for having me. I have the responsibility of replacing my colleague, Secretary João Brant, in this workshop. He has led this agenda in our government, and I will briefly present the perspective of our government and some initiatives regarding, oh my God, much better, regarding information integrity. It's weird. Well, first I want to emphasize that we are living a time when the very foundation of our public information environment is under threat. The existence of a shared framework guided by trust, credibility, public interest, and professionalism is being seriously challenged. Yet, such a framework is essential for building and sustaining democratic societies, as Anne-Marie said, is the very foundation of our daily basis democracies. The consequences of this erosion, mainly driven by the power of big tech companies, which control the flow of information in our society with unprecedented influence, are clear and serious. Attempted coups like the one we experienced in Brazil in January 23, interference in electoral and political processes, the rise of hate speech targeting vulnerable groups, and the increasing exposure of children and adolescents to harmful content. Tackling this problem is a strategic priority. That is why Brazil considers information integrity a central pillar of both democracy and human rights. This view is in alignment with ongoing global discussions within multilateral organizations. Let me highlight two important references: the United Nations Global Principles for Information Integrity and the Global Digital Compact, which calls for inclusive, secure, and trustworthy digital spaces, grounded in values like truth, inclusion, diversity, and accountability, and of course, agency, like Ambassador Anne-Marie said. During Brazil's presidency in the G20 last year, information integrity was included for the first time in the ministerial declaration of the Digital Economy Working Group. This was a milestone and a clear sign of growing international commitment to shaping healthier, more plural digital ecosystems. From Brazil's perspective, it is essential that countries work to foster diverse and resilient digital environments and to overcome the negative externalities created by the business models of major platforms. To that end, Brazil has taken important steps with initiatives that are underway within the government, National Congress, like promoted media and digital literacy. For us, this is a very strategic point, because without literacy, people can't defend themselves from the disinformation. Strengthening the debate and presenting proposals due diligence obligations for platforms, supported public media, and developing frameworks for proportional and effective accountability in digital spaces. But we have also been addressing this issue through the judiciary, notably our Supreme Court, notably with the blocking of X due to non-compliance with Brazilian court orders, and now the debate about liability of digital platforms. One issue that deserves special attention is the impact of generative artificial intelligence on journalism. Brazil believes we must not normalize the uncompensated use of professional journalistic content by AI systems. The current model undermines the economic sustainability of journalism, and that affects our entire democratic ecosystem. In response, the Artificial Intelligence Bill, recently approved in the Federal Senate, and now under the discussion in the Chamber of Deputies, includes a provision for fair compensation when copyrighted material is mined or used to train AI systems. But we are aware that national measures alone are not enough. Turning principles into actions requires coordinated multi-stakeholder efforts. It demands dialogue across sectors and regions to address algorithmic transparency and to ensure fast, coordinated responses to disinformation campaigns. In particular, regulating digital ecosystems requires international cooperation to strike the right balance between freedom of expression and accountability. Brazil is proud to have contributed to this agenda in partnership with the UN and UNESCO through the launch of the Global Initiative for Information Integrity on Climate Change, which I should mention is the topic of a dedicated workshop today at 3:30 p.m. But just to point here, the initiative's work is structured around 4 main pillars: integrating information on climate change into international agendas, promoting global mobilization by inviting diverse sectors to share tools, knowledge, and resources that support information integrity. 3, financing projects aimed at strengthening information integrity related to climate change, and institutionalizing the agenda of information integrity on climate change by encouraging the development of public policies on the issue. We invite the international community to join us in this effort. Let us turn shared principles into practical collective action through participation in the UNESCO partnership call and the multi-stakeholder mobilization being led by the COP30 presidency. Information integrity is a shared responsibility. Together, we can build public trust, protect the democratic dialogue, and ensure the reliable, accurate information serves as a solid foundation to address the climate change of our time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this broad overview. I think you really brought in a lot of different perspective and also highlighted that there are really a lot of different initiatives out there. And one of the key things, at least for me, that you mentioned now is that it's fantastic to see that Brazil is at the forefront of many of these issues, but that national action alone is not, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient in and of itself. So it's really important to say how can it inspire this collective action that you referred to. And it will be very interesting also to explore how these initiatives that you refer to and also this document, but also the global principles by the UN and the Global Digital Compact, how they can really be operationalized and how they can inspire different actors and governments to take action for this. To linking back with what you said, this shared reality, which is also something that is very often referred to that the Nobel Peace Prize, Maria Ressa, is always saying that without, just to paraphrase a bit, that without information integrity, we're not able to have this trust and facts, and therefore not a shared reality that's the basis of democracy. So thank you very much for saying, for outlining how the Brazilian approach is to rebalance this power and focus more on information integrity. There are a few things that you mentioned that I would also like to still ask our next speaker, Bia Barbosa from the Coalition for Rights on the Net, to speak on. One aspect, you brought in also generative AI, which I think is really important to also look forward, not only address the same issues that we've been speaking for many years now that are unfortunately still not solved, but also to really bring in new developments and emerging technologies that accelerate and exacerbate many of the challenges we're talking, and to ensure this remuneration that you refer to. So this is one of the key words, remuneration, but then also the essential role of pluralism for information integrity is something that was mentioned by both of our speakers already. And then also how this information integrity can be linked to platform governance and platform regulation, I think is a very important angle to further explore. So if, Bia, you could jump on some of these keywords and also bring in the example of like the Brazilian Internet Steering Committee and the approaches that you're taking. I think this would help to take the conversation further. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julia. Good morning, everyone. It's very nice to be here with you all. Thank you, Nick and the CGI for helping organizing this gathering here. And the Brazil Internet Steering Committee, as we mentioned, we are a multi-stakeholder space made of representatives from government, business sector, academia, and civil society, where I come from, and responsible for developing guidelines for the use and development of the internet in Brazil. So I'd like to share a little bit with you some reflections that we have made in the committee regarding this topic. But I would like to start reaffirming the importance of plural, diverse, and independent information ecosystem to ensure the integrity of online information. We need journalism, we need media outlets, we need independent journalism initiatives to fight against the disinformation and online, but only to be able to promote a more diverse public debate on this new public sphere. As mentioned before by Renata and by the ambassador as well, large digital platforms, including artificial intelligence, a system for moderation and content recommendation, have revolutionized the way we disseminate and consume information. And unfortunately, today is the technical, political, and institutional decisions from these companies that determine what information we have access to through hyper-personalization of content. Specifically, two companies, Google and Meta, for sure, hold a dominant global position in the distribution of news and information. Daily, 5 billion people access information through their platforms and services. And the media's heavy reliance on these platforms to reach their audiences threatens the independence and sustainability of journalism. This can lead to a fragmented information landscape, limiting access to pluralistic information, exacerbating political polarization, and hindering the construction of a pluralistic public discourse. All this in a scenario where users don't know what journalistic information has been automatically excluded or to which they have been explicitly exposed. For this reason, the Brazilian Internet Steering Committee, in its effort to formulate guidelines for platforms regulations, has placed the integrity of information as one of the principles for this regulation. We have an open consultation on that to listen to Brazilian society about these principles. And according to this one, regulation should act to protect the right to information and promote the accuracy, consistency, credibility, and reliability of content, process, and information systems. In addition to that, to maintain a healthy and safe ecosystem, quality information, journalistic information, scientific content, and policies for preserving memory and combating fraud and misinformation should be promoted through regulation. In other words, in a scenario where social media are the main sources of traffic for online sites, according for about 2/3 of their global reach, social media content recommendation systems should expand diversity and reliable sources of information. This can be done, for example, through self-regulatory standards such as the Journalism Trust Initiative, developed by organizations as Reporters Without Borders and already adopted by more than 2,000 media outlets worldwide. But producing quality content, as Julia mentioned, is expensive and the growing role of intermediaries between the media and their audience has led to a significant loss of advertising revenue for media outlets. These resources are now enriching platforms and, above all, being used by AI companies to train their models without taking into account the rights of content, the copyrights content, and the rights from creators and journalists. In Brazil, there are currently 3 models under discussion on how to compensate journalism for the loss of advertisers to platform market, for the use of journalist content by these companies, and also for tackling the information disorder caused by business models that aim for profit rather than fact-based public debate. The first one, already mentioned by Julia, I think, already adopted in several countries, deals with copyright remuneration for journalistic initiatives. So the use of journalist content, for example, in platforms, news aggregators would generate payments for the links used in these systems. This is the model currently under discussion in the Artificial Intelligence Regulation Bill that Renata mentioned at the Brazilian Parliament. The second model is the same one implemented in countries such as Australia and Canada, which provide compensation to media outlets through bargaining agreements. This was considering a legislative initiative discussed in the Congress, but has not yet been approved. And finally, a third model under discussion that provides that is based on taxation of platforms, based on their annual income or advertising revenue, to allocate resources to a public fund to promote journalism, which should contribute to the sustainability of media in regions considered news deserts or with low information pluralism. The Brazilian Internet Steering Committee also conducted a study on this topic, on the subject, mapping out the main tensions in this debate in Brazil. One of the difficulties they identified, for example, is conceptualizing journalistic content. What is journalism? What is not journalism? And establishing who should be remunerated, the journalists or the media outlets. Another controversy is who should pay and for what. That is, what should be remunerated by the platforms. The publication of a link, the snippets, so small excerpts from the report, from a text, so journalist content. Should entertainment journalism be included in the remuneration rules or not? So these are all issues that require further study, but they need to be urgently considered by public authorities, decision makers, and legislators. If we don't want journalism to become increasingly weakened in the face of the enormous powers of these digital giants, and reliable information to be lost forever among clicks in search for engagement. Thanks a lot for this 5 minutes, and I hope you can join the conversation afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bia. I think really also your last sentence was very powerful on saying that it's not being lost like the journalism. And I think it really speaks to how important it is not only to speak about what we see and very often like this almost negative framing of, there's so much disinformation around, but it's really also about what we don't see and what we want to see and how to make sure that credible information, reliable information, independent media, the information that is needed for democracy is available, accessible in the digital space, and also that we have this shared view on it. Some of the aspects that you mentioned, like the fragmentation, the hyper personalization, of course, only increases with generative AI. So it's really important to turn back on the role, the essential role that journalism plays for information integrity with this positive framing. And thank you also for outlining also these initiatives and different regulatory approaches to ensuring that journalists and their work is not being exploited by digital giants, how you refer to them, and that they make more profit while really draining out the journalistic work. With these examples from specifically the Brazilian context, but also obviously you already referred to a lot of other initiatives and regulatory approaches, it would be interesting to also link it back to this international discussions, international initiatives. Again, we already heard about the Global Digital Compact. We know that there are a lot of different other initiatives out there, like the Visas Plus 20 and other things. There are a lot of initiatives, so it would be really useful for the conversation. And I would like to ask our next speaker, Jan Dublinski, who is the head of policy and learning at the Deutsche Welle Academy, to help us to kind of link this together, right? We now heard journalism is essential for information integrity. We have these big players out there. We have a lot of initiatives. So where do you see the need and what concretely to do to foster media freedom, to safeguard it in this international information integrity conversations, and to also bring in the perspective of the Deutsche Welle? That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. I'm quite impressed by what we heard so far. I don't know how it is for you, but it's really a wealth of information. And I'm just trying to get it together. And for me, it's quite an exciting moment, because in the past IGFs we've always struggled to get the journalism topics on the agenda, and now suddenly it's there, and it's clear to everyone that something needs to happen. So this, for me, being a former journalist, I worked 20 years as a reporter. It's exciting to see, and it's and now I run, with international development money, larger projects to support media freedom and the development of independent and reliable media. For me, it's not about saving media houses per se. It's about saving the function of journalism. So, right, it's about understanding the world where we are through information. First function, second function is, for me, holding power to account. Still, who else does it if not journalists? And the third is enabling dialogue in society. And this is what we want to be enabled in this new world that we're in. And Anne-Marie, really pointed out well the problems, and I think it's good that we don't only talk about the problems, but about what we can do. And that's my first answer, Julia, is that we really need, focused and outcome-oriented work. So if we all travel to Oslo, I think we should each know why we're here and what we're targeting and what we want to achieve. That's, for me, the first thing. But I'd like to add one problem to the problems Anne-Marie outlined. It's that the development money is at the moment severely cut, not only by the US government, as you know, 268 million of annual spending are cut, which is a large portion of international development aid for media, but also other countries withdraw, which is a major problem, obviously, and I'd like to at least mention it. But it's not only the funding cuts, it's also the threats to journalists and human rights defenders that come when authoritarian regimes now take over. And there's this image of information deserts. So if journalism goes away, suddenly we have deserts or steppes or something like this. But the truth, it's not dying out. It's just that the whole space gets flooded with wrong and false and intentionally misleading information. So it's more the idea of the mud sweeping across our spaces. And this is, I think, what we're up against. So for me, I'd like to highlight three aspects, and I'll go through each of them. The first is we need international frameworks. The second is we need to conduct fast and applied research to guide our strategies. And the third is that we need to strengthen partnerships for media viability and the survival of good quality information. So let me talk about the first, the international frameworks. For me, there are a number of frameworks that are of importance, the Media Freedom Coalition, the things UNESCO does. But at the moment, the most important process that you should all be aware of, and you are aware of, obviously, is the WSIS Plus 20. And we should be, the documents are for review since last Friday, I think. And it's, for me, it's three things that are really important for the WSIS Plus 20. First of all, we need to make sure the basic human rights are strengthened in that document, especially freedom of expression. In the line C9, for those of you who are involved, I think you should comment and strengthen this with your partners. Second is, of course, multi-stakeholder model is key. It's not about states talking to each other. It's about everybody being involved. It's inclusive, human rights-based, human-centric, the type of multi-stakeholder at IGF that we want to advance also in the future. And then, of course, platform accountability is something that the WSIS Plus 20 review should be insisting on, if you ask me. So that's my first point. The second point I'd like to make is research. I mean, the results Julia just highlighted are extraordinary. I've had the privilege to read her executive summary already, and I'm really looking forward to reading the full report. It's really in detail. It has contains a lot of expertise from the people she interviewed, and she got to round tables, and it really will guide us. And the Brazilian example is a brilliant one where we can all learn a lot. So I think we need those kind of studies. And I'd like to mention the State of Media Development report we as DW Academy have just published. It's an overview of where international media development is at the moment. I can talk about it more later if you ask me to, and I'll have a few copies if you want to have a look at where is media development at the moment going and what are the problems that we need to tackle. And my third and last point is the Media Viability Manifesto initiative, which is an example for really grassroots experts coming together from, I think over 20, media development organizations, really trying to say what can we do about media viability. And of course, there's no silver bullet in saving journalism and quality information. But there is now, thanks to this initiative, a common language. So we have definitions of what we talk about when we talk sustainability, when we talk viability, and we have a common advocacy agenda, and we know how to move forward. And of course, we align, practical implementation in the future, which is really welcomed also by donors, because they want the sector to get together. They want people to align and know what they do, and not everybody running in a different direction. And I think this is advancing well, and it shows that something can be done. It's small steps, but here I have a few copies also of the Media Viability Manifesto if you're interested, but you can find both documents if you Google them. So let me sum up. Media Viability Manifesto, I think, is a key initiative for advancing not only, consulting media on how to better reach their audiences, but also how to establish frameworks that help media actually to do their job. Then research in general, I think, is something we need, but it needs to be targeted, strategically targeted towards what we want to achieve. And of course, let me remind you of the international frameworks like the WSIS Plus 20 review, and they must contain, the essence of the functions of journalism that we all try to advance. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for also this very useful framing and additions, and really pointing to the fact of the need to safeguard journalistic functions. So it's not about just saving the newspapers nobody reads, as we heard in the opening, or something else, but it's really, when we speak about democracy and integrity, it's really about how can we contain what journalism's role is in society and in democracy. And I want to jump on one of the points that you said, that of course the media development sector is now under additional strain also, which means there is an increased need for better partnerships, for being more strategic, for being more focused, for really trying to identify also what specifically should be supported and invested to build a better and healthier information ecosystem. And that's, I think, a perfect link to our next speaker, and to Magnus Ag, who is the head of public interest tech at IMS, to really precisely try to do that, right? So to see, of course, the role of the media development sector is to help ensuring that journalism thrives, ideally, in all different contexts and under all different challenges, but then also really to look at what specifically can be done, how can technology be leveraged, how can we make sure that this big concentrated companies are not just taking over the information space, but to the contrary, how can alternatives be built that are sustainable in the best case scenario, or that can be invested in to make sure that people can access the reliable and credible information that journalists are supposed to provide. So, Magnus, it would be very interesting to hear from you. What is public interest tech, maybe, to start off with, and where do you see the role also of the media development sector with now this need for targeted action to support alternative infrastructures, and to not only go to this assessment, the current ecosystem is not in line with public interest, but what can we create alternative, how can we support, and how can we catalyze also this maybe examples, local experiences, and bring it to the international component.
Thank you so much, Julia, both for the questions, but also for, I think, for all of us to pull us together. We merged 3 panels in this, and your work here has really been outstanding, and you don't get to say that as a moderator, but someone who's been on the sideline of that's really grateful for that. And another one I just want to thank off the bat, Colette from my team, who is on maternity leave now, have not given birth as far as I know, but looking online. So thank you, Colette, for getting all of us here. You've really played a key role. Thank you to all of you panelists for being here. Really excited for this conversation. I thought my contribution would try to limit it, but the solution focused, anchored on like 3 elements. IMS, what are we? Information integrity, what do we see there? And then these alternative platforms, how does that fit into it? So just for the context, IMS is next year 25 years of media development with a model of supporting good journalism, the production of it, the viability of it, the viability manifesto collaboration with Deutsche Welle, and we of course very much aligned with Deutsche Welle on many, many things, so glad to be here on building on that. What Jan just said, also the safety component, key of course, and then this enabling environment that over the years have changed. It's been very much safety at some point, it's still very much safety, but of course digital environment is what dominates a lot. So that's kind of where I come from, and where we do this development work and where we have our partners is in areas of crisis and conflict and democratic transition. So the relationship with government are different and changing, but not always easy. So some of these conversations was really interesting. Like, what's the perspective there from those kind of places where you might not have the same level of trust in your government? And there, looking at the solution is really exciting. The journalists or others who are building something, they are so often the ones we kind of find inspiration from. And that's where this information integrity framing is really welcomed by us. They are these journalists that we work with hit by disinformation, the devastating consequences there. They're paralyzed sometimes, or they're targeted specifically, business models challenged, so their ability to fight back often limited. And I think information integrity just hits at that, what our partners are trying to do. And with a nod to Guy Berger, that many of you know and is our board chair now, think of this as a field, right? You have a lot of weeds suddenly, like the scale of the weeds growing in this field is just immense, and you're trying to remove it, but no farmer or gardener would stop there, right? You just have an empty field. You would plant some seeds, have some flowers, some crops, something that grows and nourishes, and I think information integrity is really a helpful framing in like remind us of all that. Is not to not remove the weeds, not to not have focused good disinformation efforts all around, but it's also a reminder that, yeah, there needs to be something else. Some of that is good journalism in a traditional sense. Some are other kind of good stuff that nurtures local democracy, local participation, conversation, etc. And that's what we are here for to talk about. And I'm really excited for this solution focus on that. I think the challenge strategically and what we as an organization are trying to grasp, and I would love to have input, is this balancing between scale and local context, understanding, and agency, right? Because when you look to the company, and often when you talk platforms, you're so blinded of how big Facebook is, and like, what's the alternative? Like, are we building the alternative Facebook? Probably not. What's the Achilles heel of Facebook? Yeah, there's many, but maybe also local context understanding is pretty consistent there, right? So we as a media development organization, of course, have these wonderful partners that we have trust relationship with over 5, 10, 20 years to some extent, that have this local trust and have this local understanding. They don't have the Facebook platform and they don't own it and they don't have the capital to build it, but it's not kind of rocket science by now to host some of these things. So that's kind of how we came into talking about public interest infrastructure, and that this 100-year tradition of journalism has a good understanding of some of what is in the public interest, or how is the marginalized voice included when it functions the best, and not a carte blanche to all journalism, but like when it functions, when it's independent and when it's anchored in local communities, it really has that power to change society or to link up with broader coalitions of other actors that uses that information for something. And we framed that then as public interest infrastructure, right? I'm really pleased with these processes and other global level conversations that kind of frames that. And we really think our partners fundamentally are having something to contribute there. And it becomes kind of almost personally, because there's so much doom and gloom, and for good reasons when you walk around these panels. I'm so privileged to then work at an organization that can focus. And if you focus at a local level, at a local partner, doing something, maybe macro developments are pretty devastating in that country or globally, but there's like a little media house that is thriving, or there's a radio station that got a good community going on, and I should stop talking actually, because what it's a privilege here is also to then give the word to those organizations that are actually doing the stuff. And often I go around on stages and talk about Jamii Africa, and I'm sitting next to the founder. So maybe I'll flip it back to Julia to kind of ask the question, but just for you guys to listen to what Maximus here has to say, and then from a global perspective, think of how do we scale that? Not necessarily like Max should take over the entire world, but like similar initiative. What do you see from with your hat on in a policy process somewhere that can scale or be copied, or we can learn together, come together and build something there that is better? And it's not that it's all journalism, but I'm pretty sure there's a component there where good journalistic skills and ethics and methodology is helpful. So with that, over to Julia, and hopefully then Max, if you agree with that plan.
Thank you so much also for your enthusiasm towards the topic. I think this is also something that we often need again, right? To see in these doom and gloom conversations we're having, to really see there is so much inspiring work out there. So how can we scale it? How can we better understand it? And I mean, you already introduced our next speaker, but I just before handing over to you, Max, I think it's really important what at least comes to my mind now after hearing you speak. Magnus, is really this integrity of information, but also of the information spaces and the information ecosystem. I think this is really what we're talking about when we go into this infrastructure and how platforms, alternatives can be designed to make sure that information integrity flourishes, but also because the system works, right? So the infrastructure and the platforms are really important. And this, I think, is then the perfect introduction to our next speaker, Max Melu Mubasi, who is bringing the example Jami Africa that we already heard. If you can briefly, of course, introduce what this platforms is, and also specifically highlight, maybe to build on what we heard before, what are your lessons? Like, what are really the things that from the fantastic work you've been doing to really bring to this international community to say, look, this worked, this hasn't worked, why has it worked, why hasn't it worked, what can others learn from it, so that we can really take it further and learn from the important work that you've been doing. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Julia. And thanks, Magnus. I'm not reading anything because once I read, then I get lost. I'm Max Melo from Tanzania. Please do not search my name because you've come to realize that I've been in jail, I've been in courts for the work we do. But we run an organization known as Jami Africa, but we have several platforms. The main one is known as Jami Forums. The second one is Jami Check, which is a citizen-centric approach of countering mis and disinformation. We also have the Stories of Change platform, which is a citizen-centric approach of having citizens, including journalists, to write meaningful content that can solve issues around the space that they're living in, especially in Tanzania. We also have another whistleblowing platform specifically designed to empower citizens to speak freely without fear, while they are guaranteed over their anonymity. We call it Fichuo, it's a Swahili word. And then we have an upcoming platform which is known as Jami Data, that is designed to make sure that we decentralize data. So Jami Africa works to have a more informed citizenry. We work to have more responsive governments and also to have a participative citizen in the economic agenda. So we have 5 approaches that we employ. One is creating those digital platforms. We started back in 2002. And of course, by 2008, when the platform became more popular than even mainstream media in Tanzania, I got arrested. Then authorities said that I was a terrorist back then. But I also got arrested again, that you might find on the internet, in 2016. And of course, they had 3 criminal cases against me for creating a space where citizens felt safe to have meaningful conversations. And what we do as a second approach is making sure that we entice citizens, including journalists, to make sure that they become citizens who are more informed to hold meaningful conversations. And that also led me into issues. But what we also do to make sure that we create safe spaces for people is creating, we have partnerships with mainstream media, and we have 46 community radios that we have signed agreements with. And we have trained over 1,000 journalists, and we have over 500 journalists across the country that help us when we are fact-checking issues once they're posted on the platform. Our main platform, Jami Forums, reaches more than 4 million people per day. And with that, it becomes a local alternative for them to go, hold meaningful conversations, and remain safe. And of course, once I had those criminal cases from 2016 to 2020, I went to the court 159 times, and my bank accounts were frozen. I was not allowed to cross the borders of the city of Dar es Salaam. But in the end, the aim that we were pushing for as Jami Forums was having safe spaces and making sure that we have a Personal Data Protection Act that safeguards people's right to privacy. Also making sure that we have a law that guarantees people's right to access to information. And as we speak, we have a Data Protection Act, and I'm on the board of the Data Protection in Tanzania. But also we have an Access to Information Act, which guarantees people's right to go and ask for data. But the spaces that we have created, now we are expanding them to neighboring countries. We are now into Uganda, we are now getting into Rwanda, Kenya, DRC, and we are heading to Zimbabwe. The aim is having those local conversations in the local platforms, and whenever we go to countries, we don't treat countries the same as we treat our Tanzania country. And what we do is making sure that whenever we go to a certain country, we do research in collaboration with CSOs, media actors, and state actors who are in the ecosystem that we work in, but also making sure that when we come up with a solution, it works for the people. The reason is, when you go to a certain region, the dynamics of a certain country are totally different from the country you're serving. And that's why when we are getting to Uganda, the kind of solutions that we are now providing into Uganda are totally different from Tanzania. Because I have only 5 minutes, I know I have only seconds, I have to end up there.
Thank you so much for your introduction.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
And I think this applause showed to what I was about to say, but you heard it from everybody. Really thank you for your inspirational work and really for standing strong and for showing, I think, also all of us here in the room, but beyond that, of course, how also individuals and communities with this citizen-centric, human-centric approach can really show how we can come together and we can foster information integrity. And thank you very much for outlining it and obviously the work you do. A few things that I think were really important. I mean, everything was really important to hear, I think, also for this room, but really a few aspects that you outlined, like this local approach, this multi-stakeholder approach, are really some of the keywords that I think very nicely link also to these principles that we so much like to talk about in this international forum. You really show how it can be operationalized and how it can work on the ground. So I think this is really very inspirational to hear and also to learn from how to take this forward. Another thing that you mentioned that I think is really important is that you focus on that the platforms and spaces for these meaningful conversations work for people. And I think this is really to link it back to what public interest is about, right? And what the journalistic function is about. It's about holding power to account. It's about enabling people to have meaningful conversation, bringing people together. So I think this is really a nice framing now after we heard from all of our speakers. We now have about like half an hour to still discuss, and this is really the intention. I know you've heard now a lot from our fantastic speakers, a lot of different experiences, examples on the regional, local level, on the international level, the initiatives that are ongoing. But we would really also like to bring all of you in if you think there's specific additional aspects, national examples you would want to inform us about, inform the room about. Also, of course, if you have specific questions or something else to share. I also maybe should introduce, and apologies for only doing it now, Juliana Oms from NIC Brazil, who will also look at the online side in case there are any questions or comments. Please also feel free for those following online to post something there. So I don't know if there is already an immediate reaction. Otherwise, while you're all thinking, I would want to bounce back kind of like a question that came up now. For me, at least, listening to all of you, and this morning actually I looked at Germany Africa at the strategic plan and kind of like the promotional informational material you have online, and you have there 3 key words that you say are framing kind of like your approach, which is inform, engage, and empower. Excellent. And I think this really is for me really. First of all, of course, a powerful statement that this is really everything you're aiming to do. But this is also how I, at least, would define journalism, right? This is the role of journalism, of information integrity, and bringing it all together. So this is maybe a question now, be to you or to all of you, whether we also, because we heard Jan also saying before, we need to safeguard the journalistic function. So in this conversation on information integrity, how can we frame it around the role that be it now states or others can really take to foster this inform, engage, empower perspective, the journalistic function in the information integrity space. So I don't know if you still want to add something here, and then maybe also the other speakers want to jump on that as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Julia. Why we have inform, engage, empower? After I came out of the cases against me, which some of the cases I won, and of course they didn't go public, we came to realize that we need to also have empathy, and it's very key. When I was having cases, I managed to interact with the police, some state actors, some citizens, some media actors. One of the things that I came to realize that actually some of them were wrongly informed, and some of them we needed to engage them, and some of them needed to be empowered. So in whatever kind of activities that we are doing as Jamii Africa, we inform our actors, be it media actors, be it citizens, be it state actors and CSOs, to make sure that they are making informed decisions. And when we engage with state actors or CSOs, including media actors and citizens, we make sure that the information we're giving out there, if you go to our social media platforms, whatever information we're sending out there, it has an element of engaging the public and, of course, empowering them so that they can make informed decisions. Once a state actor is well informed, now we have a special training to government communications officers in Tanzania. We came to realize we were whistleblowing staffs, and we came to realize once citizens whistleblow staffs, there was no response. Now we created that tool, a whistleblowing tool, to become an instant impact tool. And for it to work, state actors were supposed to be responsive. You cannot have a responsive government without engaging it, without informing them, and also empowering them how to respond. After we started the Future Wolf tool, in Tanzania they call it Mdau, state actors started responding, but it's after starting the trainings to communication officers from the government side, in a nutshell.
Thank you for that. I think this is also an important aspect that also we briefly touched upon yesterday, and now you mentioned this cooperation with parts of the government, and I think this is really important to consider, especially in a context where you said you were in prison, you're like facing all these court cases, that still there are specific actors or individuals or specific bodies that you think is important to collaborate with, and to really trying to find also creative partnerships with those who are willing to drive information integrity forward. And this is, I think, also a lesson learned for this room. Yes, but please.
I wanted to add something so that when someone is reacting to this can be helpful to others. In our process, we came to realize there are times when we want to engage or partner, and there are times when we need to disengage. And there are times when we need to collaborate, partner, and of course align. So in that process, you need to know that there are partners whom you can align without partnership. There are other actors whom you can partner with a partnership kind of agreement, and there are partners whom you can have some kind of collaboration, but without any kind of partnership or alignment. So once you're having this, you need to know times when you have to disengage. There are partners that were from state actors that we decided to disengage when we came to realize it's not working the way it used to work.
Yeah, and this, I think, again, points to the fact of needing to understand the local context very well. Yes, Magnus.
Yeah, and maybe building out that, because all this is great, and we're super support the multi-stakeholder approach and why we are here. I think the complexity of it is vast, and when you put a meta person in the conversation and a global level, is a certain level of conversation. Some of the complexity, at least for me, it's not removed. It's pretty complex what Max is doing there, but getting it to a certain geography, a certain community, I think we should remember when we talk multi-stakeholder, it's not always to be up here at the global. The global is important, and I think from IMS perspective, the kind of UN guidelines and the safety of journalists, there's a good example of a really good framework agreed at this kind of level and these kind of bodies. But then the value further on is then what's the national mechanism? What are we implementing with local partners? And they're the very specific kind of understanding. What is the actor, and maybe what's the actor this month, who might not be the actor the next month? And maybe with Anne-Marie, the tech ambassador, when the war broke out in Ukraine, right? We had a relationship there, and we've had partners all over the world trying to reach big tech. Suddenly geopolitical logics there were so the big companies actually showed up. But it's just rare when you're in the local context. They really want to send kind of director level travel to listen to local partners, but thanks to the tech ambassador and her great work, and she hosted those kind of roundtables, we were able to do something. Where it was still what the company came for there was the local context understanding. They had not mapped out who's who in Ukraine and what are the credible voices, so they were eager to listen and facilitate with us. That's then slowed down significantly for many reasons now, right? But I think when we talk multi-stakeholder, it's really key to kind of remember also to take that to meaningful levels where we handle it and where the local understanding makes it tangible. And an add-on there, because all of this you hear here, journalism general, what Max is doing specifically, costs money, right? It is not free, and a really interesting kind of approach, and as we see declining funds overall, we're really struggling. Like, this is not easy. But one attempt we are piloting is, can we unlock local capitals? Can the multi-stakeholder collaborations in local context, and we see that there's business interest in having a transparent, accountable society, so you can invest cleverly in your, like, what's the model there, and what's a global donor, and like IMS able to facilitate, and it's not, that's a hard one to do global, but like there's some intentions and some frameworks that we're working on, and then it's really again down to the understanding what are the business interests that can align, or what is the government right now who's actually up for something here, because I think we have to realize, all of us, information integrity and the crops and the flowers and that cost money. It doesn't come of itself, and that's a fact, right?
Yes, I think this is really an important aspect and something we could still discuss a lot. Like, first of all, how to fund and like how funding needs to look like. And I think the second question would also be like, what does multi-stakeholderism mean? What does multi-stakeholder for information integrity mean? I know that Bia still wants to reply, and then we also have a comment or question from the floor. So Bia, just briefly, and then we will move over.
I would like just to mention, because I think that in this debate it's super important to have a state perspective regarding, because we need a state to be in the middle of the conversation somehow. Because when we look to the local perspective and the difficulty to finance local journalism, even if we manage, for example, to approve a law or a regulation that tax platforms are going to create some fund to support journalism, there is always going to be a huge battle among the big journalist companies and the local journalism. And we saw this in Brazil during one of the debates in the parliament for journalism remuneration, when we started to debate, okay, we're going to tax platforms, or we're going to have a bargaining code. Who is going to bargain? Who is going to be at the table to negotiate with the platform? Is going to be global, for example, is the big Brazilian companies, almost like a monopoly in Brazil, or is going to be the local journalism? Because, of course, we have a historic problem of media ownership concentration in Brazil. There cannot be stranding this process. Otherwise, we're going to have some funds coming from platforms, for example, but it's going to be for this. It's going to be given to the same big companies that always rule the journalism in Brazil. So how can we be able to take advantage of this kind of process at this moment to really democratize the media debate and foster and support local initiatives and fight against the news desert that we have everywhere? So we need a state at this point. Otherwise, it's going to be the local journalists, not even the local media, even individuals that are doing their job by themselves, having to fight the national companies that have always be able to get all the money available for journalism initiatives in the country.
No, this is essential, and I think it links to what we started off with, to really say it's about pluralism, right? So also state interventions need to make sure that the aim is pluralism and it's not backfiring to, again, not localizing and not heading to diversity. So thank you very much. Now we will, please, I think, sorry, give us a second so we can put on our headphones. But yes, please, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
I'm Pavel Antonov with the Blue Link Think and Action Network in Bulgaria. Thank you very much for making me feel home in this panel as a former journalist in television who has made the journey all the way to supporting civil society in the digital communication field. I have a question for you all. Since we're discussing distinct ability of journalism to abide to certain norms which serve social society and public interest, and these norms unfortunately have been in retreat over the past decades, as we can observe, how would you think, and would you support a grassroots initiative which is shaping that we try, apart from defending the field, as you are all doing, and thank you for that, to also advance a bit with these norms, the package of norms which used to apply in good watchdog journalism, onto society out there, onto the civil society communications, in the form of self-regulation perhaps. We can think of other means as well, but try to use the same package of norms outside of the journalistic field. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think this is what also the conversation about information integrity is maybe a useful starting point. I see that there are more statements, so maybe I will collect a few and then we can discuss them together so you don't have to stand around. If that's fine for everybody, then please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Anna Lührmann. I'm a member of parliament from Germany. And my question actually feeds right into what Beatrice just said. What is the role for state actors in all of this? If we talk about now finding revenues for quality journalism, for independent journalism, these revenues, if they are collected by a state authority, then who makes the decision exactly, like which media outlet gets it? And this in a day and age where actually the well-established public broadcasters are under a lot of attack and scrutiny. So what kind of mechanisms do you think are good practice for this kind of debate that is just starting in Germany, by the way? We just started a debate about raising revenue from the ads of the big platforms. But the question is then, okay, then what? Who makes the decisions and what do you think are good models here? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Larry Magid. I'm CEO of Connect Safely, which is an internet safety organization. But during my career as a journalist, I've worked for the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, BBC, CBS News, as in some cases a contractor. And during that period, like every human being, I'd made 2 or 3 mistakes over the years, and they were devastating. I mean, silly mistakes. I mean, once I accidentally referred to Macron as prime minister rather than president, and I was horrified that I had made an error and went to great lengths to make sure that this was CBS News, that they corrected it. Yet, my MAGA friends are convinced that we in the mainstream media are full of lies and misinformation, even though that's a fireable offense in any major newspaper or broadcast to deliberately mislead your audience. How do we convince people? How do we make the case that those of us, in my case formerly, and those of us who are actively working in journalism, are working very hard to tell the truth, independent of whatever ideology you happen to subscribe to?
Thanks a lot. So very easy questions. Thank you very much. Just to repeat briefly. So the first one was really pointing to the fact of the need of like having this professional standards, this like good norms of watchdogs, and whether this could be advanced from the journalism sector to also civil society, society at large. The second question was a very important one of what is the role of the state, and to also just make sure that if state intervention wants to address this undue power of the big players, that then it doesn't lead to undue state control, right? So I think this is a very important question, and I would really love to also follow up after the session with you. And then the third one, which I think is maybe the most difficult one, I'm not sure whether we're going to find an easy response to how to really foster in this whole conversation the essential role of journalism, of truth-finding, of being fact-based, evidence-based, and not only, and I think if, as a moderator, I will allow myself apologies to say one sentence on it, which is something how the OSCE, we were approaching it, to also try to frame the conversation on literacy. Now there's a lot of conversation, right? Literacy, media literacy, digital literacy, information literacy, which is very much about increasing individuals' capacity to understand how not only what is wrong and what is right, but rather to understand how it all works, right? Where information comes from. And an aspect that we at the OSCE try to add on to that is to also have media freedom literacy, to help to better explain really the role that media and independent journalism and the journalistic function plays for democracy, for society, and for everybody. So this was just one addition from my side, but then I will open up. I don't know, we can also do a round. Maybe we still have like 15 minutes. Maybe each of you want to reply to some of the questions, also make some additions. Yes, Jan, please go ahead.
Well, I can make a start. I don't think I can ad hoc immediately answer it fully, but the first question, of course, this depends a lot on national context and culture that is already established, as you know. I'm probably not telling you something new here. But then you can use the international norms and things that are well established, and then have, again, a multi-stakeholder dialogue on what is now relevant and what needs to be put forward. And it doesn't always have to be as big, as grandiose as the Internet Governance Forum, but it can be a national initiative towards reshaping the agenda. And I'm quite optimistic that these things can actually work. The second question on the role of state support and not interference, I think it's an important question, but I think we have to differentiate between media that are financially independent and those that are editorially independent, right? So I think it is possible to, in nowadays that we are to face it, that media sometimes needs support, and public service broadcasting is one example for that, right? And yet we have established with public service broadcasters the idea that they must be editorially independent, and there's provisions for that. And the same holds true for other public interest media, which is what we're looking after, right? It's the media that serve a public function, as I said. And there we, of course, then cannot only have the state actors or the ministries decide on how the money is being spent, but they then need to engage different actors, again, multi-stakeholders, to discuss how, in a given context, this is best done. And I'd like to stress there's a role for the intermediaries here, like IMS, like DW Academy for the development context. There are other intermediaries for national contexts that have the expertise and the independence to then advance on these matters. That's the first attempt as an answer. I'm sure you have other aspects. And sorry, the third was on media literacy. I think that's an important component. I mean, it's all about not only the classic journalist that is the gatekeeper and sends out this information. It's the dialogue with the educated audience, obviously. That, like, we use the UNESCO term, the media information literacy, which is not just an educative thing, but to me it's quite a political thing. It's about critical thinking. It's about enabling, as Max says, right? Enabling people to take it into their own hands and to discuss the advocacy on their access to information, on the, as you say, Julia, the media freedom literacy. So the knowing how important media freedom is not only to the professionals, but it's something for everybody. Anybody should have access to information rights. Go to the governments and ask questions and get the data, and also express freely and have a fair dialogue and so on. So this is something that people should be engaged in. This is why I like Max's approach to have also citizens involved on the platform, but also professional journalists who still have a different role to play. But I think it comes together, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm. This is for sure an important aspect, this relationship between media and us audiences, that really has been disrupted, not only financially by these big gatekeepers, but also really from this engagement perspective, which for sure makes it more difficult. Who wants to come next?
No, I would just like to add,
yes,
just
please.
to give an example to talk about with Anna regarding the threats that we have once we have a public fund, how to really be able to distribute these resources to foster a more diverse media landscape. I think that the multi-stakeholder approach is necessarily has to be there, but not only regarding having small companies or local media outlets or big national journalism initiatives, but having civil society on the table as well. Having some organizations that are not directly interested in having this money for them, but to help to approve criteria, for example, to develop guidelines for the revenue distribution from the fund. In Brazil, we have a public funded this from audiovisual production for cinema that works pretty well and helped a lot to develop the national audiovisual sector in Brazil, and it works with the participation of different sectors from the audiovisual market, but also from the civil society perspective. So the independent producers and actors and associations from citizens in general. So I think that each local country are going to have examples of what helps and what works and what doesn't work. But I think that this can't be an excuse for not trying to implement this kind of things. Because what we felt at the Brazilian parliament at that point is that we don't know how we're going to redistribute the funds. So we got stuck on this debate and we didn't move forward because it was a pretty complex topic to define what is journalism and what is not. I totally agree. It's difficult even to define what is public interest journalism, but it's something that we have to go forward and agree that we might have different concepts in each country, considering the history of the country, the composition of the society, the historic problems that each society has. But I think that it's possible to move forward, but we need this to be changed for a debate that is not only about, I think that Ian mentioned this, or Magnus at the beginning, is not about giving money for economic sector, for the media sector, is something that is related to democracy, so it's something that should be taken as important for by everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much to outline the need. Also for safeguards. Yes, Renata, please.
Just two things. I think regarding the norms and the challenges we are facing when we talk about public interest journalism, whatever it is, I think we have a challenge regarding the journalism schools. Mm-hmm. And this not, we didn't talk about this, we didn't have time to do it. So I want to point something regarding this. We are not training or preparing our journalists to face the challenges we have nowadays. And the schools are stuck in the last century, I think. What we are seeing, unfortunately, is journalism adapting to the format and standards of communication imposed by the big techs, seeking headlines and approaches that generate more clicks. And this is very, very bad for our proposal in regarding all the discussions, because it's not only about the remuneration, it's not only about the framework, but we are talking about how to form people to produce a good content, a quality content, and the schools have an important role on that. So I think we have a homework to do regarding the formation of journalists, and this needs to be done side by side with the literacy initiatives. I want to point about the role of the states. I think BIA brings some initiatives, but I think there is a plenty of initiatives that government can use to foster a more diverse ecosystem. In Brazil, I want to remember an initiative we had in, I don't know, previously government, Lula, we call Lula 1 or 2, I don't know, and to create public calls for proposals to support local independent media that we call free media points. And that's a start because focus on communities. Mm-hmm. And this is very important, and it's another approach to foster public interest journalism. Thank you very much.
So all have a role to play, from journalists to states to civil society to all of us. Thank you. Magnus.
Yes, very good questions. I'm really grateful for the kind of level of this conversation. I think for the first one, Blue Link was that Bulgaria, if I understood it right, really interested in these kind of self-regulation and other good norms. And what we're trying to do with some of these collaborations, also with alternative platforms that are a little like side to classic journalism, is what is it that the journalistic tradition actually did over 100 years, or wherever you frame it, that worked? And how does that look when you now have digital technology that at many levels is amazing? You can listen to your audience, your community understand, engage in a way you just couldn't with a paper newspaper. That in itself is a good development. Then we have all the big tech complexities around it. But that, I think, and for that, it's not an easy task. We're actually starting an initiative with Jami and with Splice Media, some of you might know from Singapore, that we call Good Commons. And kind of exactly looking at what is it? It's not that all of it will be journalistic products and solutions, but there's something from journalism. That's our claim to kind of be part of it. But what the good commons kind of spaces we can create or that are there, very newly, just working on it. But goodcommons.world, we really want to hear from people who are building something. So this sounds like very much like we should connect after. On the state responsibility, I think frame it two ways, and the kind of democratic functioning Germany version of it. I think the synergies here, and in a truly post-colonial, like someone like Max have solved some of this already. Like we can listen and we can learn there, and then as privileged states, I live in Copenhagen, Denmark, think through synergies, like the development mechanisms you have, are they also, when you now think of the German solution to this, there are definitely synergies. We are in the same digital spaces. We are facing the same kind of issues around disinformation, undermined business model. So even though we work a lot in Afghanistan, for example, I don't think we talk to that government on how to kind of allocate funds from big tech, right? There's a different solution there, but that it plays into the German conversation with big tech and taxation, I think is crucial for us to find those synergies. And Larry Magid, the CBS, or multiple outlets, but the CBS component there, not easy, but what I think young people, they hear CBS News and they don't really trust it, or it's not really a brand that kind of generate anything for them. I think one of the things I see with Max is what doing is really listening. Where are the young people now? And I think they trust the Jami Africa brand because they see action happening. And I'm not saying, I'm deep admiration for CBS and the long history of what's been going on journalistic there and come out of a media development tradition, of course. But an ability to meet people where they are, and an example of what Jami is doing, like the pothole in the road, right? People post on Jami forums, there's a hole in my road. And they see action, right? That is taken and delivered to a government agency or some office, and maybe the hole is fixed. And not all journalism is that simple, or maybe that is not even journalism, but when you add a little bit of the complexity to a problem solved, there's something there in trying to listen and really understand, because it's not that young people don't want to be informed. You saw during COVID, some of the credible outlets and kind of thorough reporting really got traction because people got to navigate and they want to make good, healthy decisions for their own lives. I don't think people don't want that. That has not changed. They're just doing it in different ways. And I think something like Jami is kind of clever in how they approach that, because that's difficult, but it is also a new opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you. In less than a minute. I'm not alone. I have a team of 55 behind me at Jami Africa. But fact-checking in the digital age is a bit tough. That's why we have initiatives with 5 universities in Tanzania, journalism schools. So we train journalists on the use of AI in the digital age when it comes to information fact-checking. But we have cases which are a bit tough. When you're fact-checking a president, for example, what's happening in Rwanda as we speak, it's really hard to fact-check what's happening. But what we do is making sure that we put all the facts in their space and we let the public decide. The same applies to Tanzania and the other geographies that we are serving. We also have a journalist desk at Jami Africa, which serves the journalism industry to make sure that when there is something that they want from our end, we can help them to make sure that they fact check it as soon as possible. We receive more than 500 discussions per day. Then you need a huge team to manage the conversations that are happening. And otherwise, we let the communities help us on moderation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think this is perfect timing. So I will just take the last 20 seconds to try to, obviously it's not possible to summarize, but this was really an incredibly rich discussion. So I'm just going to say what I'm going to take from this conversation is really, I think one of the key aspects, there is no one size fits all, but we really have to look at the local context, even if we have these principles that of course apply everybody. There is an important role of the state, but also to ensure meaningful multi-stakeholderism and synergies that I think were also pointed to. And then something that we have to uphold is really the essential role of journalism in the conversation on information integrity. And then I want to add on a sentence that was inspired by something that Magnus said before. I think that all of us really have a role to play in seeding the democratic seed by investing in journalism, information integrity, and alternative platforms. So please join me in thanking the fantastic panels and also the audience. Thank you so much for your contribution.